All right. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you all for joining us for our Inquiry, the Power of Poetry series featuring Darla Himeles. Darla is a Philadelphia-based poet, translator, and essayist who was raised in Dallas and Los Angeles. A Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee, Darla can be read in recent and forthcoming issues of Lesbians Are Miracles, Orange Blossom Review, the Massachusetts Review, the Night Heron Barks, New Ohio Review, and Nailed. Darla holds an AB in English from Bryn Mawr College, an MFA in Poetry and Translation from Drew University, and a PhD in American Literature from Temple University, where she works as the Assistant Director of the university's Writing Center and teaches undergraduate poetry workshops. A 2018 K. Patricia Cross Future Leaders Award recipient, Darla is the author of the chapbook Flesh Enough and the full-length poetry collection Cleave. So thank you very much for being here with us today, Darla.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, Darla, yes. Thanks for being on our show. And Kathy and Andrea, it's always great to have poetry readers back on our show. So Darla, let's start off. Andrea knows the big question, the Barnum and Bailey big tent question. What cheesesteak? No, I'm kidding. Yeah. No, what does inquiry mean to you?
Yeah. Has anyone ever said, I don't know?
You don't know?
No, that's not my answer. I'm just curious. I'm asking you a question back. Has anyone ever said, I don't know?
No. One said, I don't know. Well, yeah. Andrea, mark that down as we're down to 4 stars now with Darla. We're hoping she can recover. No.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about the question a lot, and it means a lot of different things to me. There's so many right answers. So I think it's connected to, most importantly to me, to curiosity. I mean, it's also, of course, connected to science, verdicts, investigations. It's connected to learning, which is cousin to what I'm thinking about in terms of curiosity. But I've been thinking about how curiosity to me is the opposite of death, and it's the opposite of panic. And as a person who has done a lot of work around complex PTSD and anxiety in therapy, which has animated a lot of my poetry, I think a lot about how being in the grip of panic is helped or solved in part by remembering curiosity.
Yeah.
Like a way of softening in those gripped moments, which I think is essential to all kinds of art making.
Yeah.
So
no, it's neat. So yeah, so part of it is, I mean, this is very interesting. Curiosity is kind of a therapeutic medium. I mean, if you think about it, no, I'm just thinking about it is curiosity just opens up all these doors.
it does.
And if you're in a room that has some issues, some new doors opening could be really good.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a thing that a lot of therapists say, but I worked with a trauma specialist for a few years, and in processing my own history, she would remind me repeatedly, stay curious, like keep following it. What happens next? Where else can you go? What else could that mean? Where does that start? What does that younger part of yourself need? Can you stay curious? Can you keep thinking about it? Which is like, it's the opposite of giving in to the power of just the feeling you have in the moment, which can, shut you down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think too is when you stop being curious, it's almost like a whirlpool. It's almost like you're losing your gravity into me as you're falling down a hole. And the curiosity keeps you, moving forward one step at a time. You're not, So no, no, I like it. I like what you're saying about it.
What you said about falling down in a hole, that was a real epiphany moment for me. I had been afraid of what I considered this abyss inside myself, that if I had allowed myself to get more down or go deeper into this history of myself, that I would fall into an abyss. And I think that part of my own journey was realizing there is no abyss in me. There's a self in me that is endlessly possible and imaginative, which connects to making poems, like, like writing away from that fear of what you might know deep, deep inside to like curiosity about what you know inside and what you can use from that.
Nice. Yeah, I have to find it. Once again, I'll have to challenge my computer to behave. There's a poem about walking down the street, and it says, you're walking down the street and I fell in a hole. And I walked down the street again, I fell in a hole. And then about the 5th time, I decided to walk down a different street.
Yes.
So no, listen, I applaud your courage to, engage your story and stay curious.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that there is courage in it, just like there's courage in writing a poem, which is a vulnerable thing that not all people understand as a valid use of time, right? Or career or whatever. It's like a kind of risk taking.
So is there, to start off, a poem or two you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you. I thought I would start with my chapbook, Flesh Enough. Oof. Problem with the blurred background is, there we go. Put it over my face. Which came out of a curiosity that I was having during my PhD program, which was this sort of like dual obsession I had about animals and about animal extinction, and then about Jewishness and the effect of, hundreds of years of being pushed out of different places and the history of the Holocaust and all of that. So this book is a way of kind of honoring that, like, what are these dual obsessions about? How do they connect? So I'm going to read 2 poems. The first is more explicitly about animals, second more explicitly about Jewishness, that I think are really connected to curiosity and inquiry for me. This first one, I'll tell you, can I say something about it before I read it? Or
Yeah, no, absolutely. Give us context.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to fall into the hole.
No, don't fall into the hole. Don't fall into the hole. So,
watch out.
So like, I love reading animal facts. And when I've written a lot of poems about animals, and it usually starts with me going to Wikipedia and then just sort of flying off from there into books and all kinds of things, just trying to learn more. And I remember seeing somewhere that a blue whale's tongue weighs as much as an elephant. And right. And
joking. Jeez.
So once I got over the shock of just that fact, which is in itself just a wonder, I was like, when we no longer have blue whales, we could at least understand something about the blue whale by comparing it to elephants. Wow. But what if we don't have elephants anymore either? And how like our knowledge is linked to comparison. You understand a new thing by relating it to a thing you already know. So as animals become extinct, we lose that like living archive. Comparison. Yeah. So I was thinking about that future in which neither exists, and a kid might be wondering, well, what was a blue whale like? What was an elephant like?
Yeah, nice.
So this poem is called They'll Say the Blue Whale's Tongue Weighed as Much as an Elephant. Someday your daughter will voice this fact and ask what an elephant was like. And you will find her sun-baked tires to pet and heavy bovine leathers and summer earth whose anthills pulse. And you will bring her photos of a trunk spiraled round a paint-dipped brush or splashing pond water into an open mouth. And you will run with palm leaves catching wind on either side of your head and rock the arc of your body over couch cushions to show how rescuers grunted CPR in BG's rhythm on the last baby elephant, his mother gone before him. And your daughter will sketch elephants from old books and ask what they smelled like, whether their stomachs were softer than their backs. You'll swerve back to the weight of an elephant, how even an elephant 11 months with child equaled but the tongue of the blue whale, whose heft sung the fathoms. But what if she asks the weight of the blue whale's voice? How will you give her a song that swelled the sea, a heart the size of a Volkswagen pounding?
Wow. Speaking of blue whales, are they an endangered species?
They were. I don't know if they still are. I don't know. You'd think I would have that one in my head, but I don't know.
Well, up here in Maine, there's new lobster rules technically about right whales and
Mhm.
getting the lobster things. And they just spotted some whales down by the Cape Cod Canal.
Yeah,
There were four whales together, which was amazing. They never see four. They were like this armada that was going under the Bourne Bridge or something.
yeah.
But I don't remember hearing anything about blue whales anywhere in any newspaper or magazine recently.
I think that we knew blue whale songs before we really knew a whole lot else about them. Like,
Yeah,
like those whale songs that were recorded really helped to
yeah,
deepen people's connection with environmental concerns, along with Rachel
yeah,
Carson, Island
yeah,
Spring.
yeah,
Um, I didn't know you were in Maine, John. I lived there for several years as well.
yeah. Nice, nice.
So the next poem is called Redolence, Redolence, which is tied to smell. It's also tied to memory. There's a nuance to redolence that's about smell-oriented memory. So you have to, like, when something is redolent of something, you could say it just smells like that thing, or you could say that it reminds you or suggests or evokes another place or time. So I thought about when I learned that Zyklon B, which is one of the gases that was used during the Second World War in gas chambers, smelled like bitter almonds. I wondered if, were there people in that moment who smelled it and hearkened back to another place through that smell. And, one of the places that almonds can grow, bitter almond can grow, is in Palestine, Israel. So that kind of led me to this poem, that sort of meandering
Yeah.
outline. Redolence. Oh yeah, sorry, one more thing. I think a lot about, like, how genetically we are inscribed by our histories, our ancestries, how we feel previous generations trauma in some way in our bodies and in our lives, epigenetics. I also think about the way that memory and history is conveyed, of course, explicitly through parents and grandparents, but also implicitly, the things that one is modeled in terms of what to be worried about or what to notice or what to care about. So with that, redolence. Is redolence past? Those who never slept under an almond tree's branch might not catch almond blossoms on a breeze, even if their grandmothers dreamt by the Dead Sea. I, too, born beyond Babylon, who never knew bitter almond, crept through the vents as my ancestors showered in gas, might not taste almond's breath, sour sweet in a morning's kiss. Thank
Very
you.
visual evoking. Yeah. Yeah, I like the part that you were never there. Yeah, just very interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting to think, I mean, the Jewish people were wanderers for quite a long time. First by choice and orientation, tribes moving, and then, through being expelled from various places. So I
Yeah.
think about how, we're not the only ones who this is true about, but how these different geographies and the experience of being in them is passed on in generations. And that includes, I wonder if it includes sort of sensory sensitivities of certain kinds, like remembering a thing you never smelled yourself, but that your grandparents did.
Well, our son-in-law grew up in Presque Isle, Maine, and northern Maine is one of the potato capitals of the world. So if you go up there, there are giant potato factories where there are huge trucks in front that are holding, 2,000 or 3,000 potatoes that are going to be turned into all sorts of potato stuff. And yeah, it's like you're just immersed in a total potato chip heaven. That's
Yeah, Maine potatoes are the best, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the roadside stands, the roadside stands where you see fruit and corn.
Yeah.
Up there, Andrea, they're all potatoes. Russ, it's all potatoes in bags, in 5-pound bags. There is nothing else. There is no fruit. There's no flowers. There's no distractions. It's potato, potato, potato. Yeah, it's really, when I saw it, I'm like, I'm in my world. I love potatoes.
Yeah. I love them too. You can eat them so many different ways.
Yeah, great. I know we're having a lot of humor today, but I don't know. It's one of those days. So no,
Absolutely.
these are great. These are great. So let's have Andrea or Kathy chime in with some comments or questions. I already gave Darla the run, don't hide kind of thing if it gets too intense, but go ahead. Anybody? Andrea, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you have anything? I have some things, but okay. Darla, beautiful readings, beautiful poems. I'm thinking about so many things. I mean, I think the multiple threads that you're weaving are just so interesting and so like powerful. And I guess I'm wondering, like, going back to the beginning, because to me it's like the scientific inquiry and then the feeling of the abyss are sort of different ways to sort of like open into a poem, or different ways to like enter into a poem. And I'm wondering, for you, does it sort of just depend on the poem that you're writing? Like, for example, when you're talking about researching animals during your PhD program and animal facts, to me that feels very cerebral versus sort of like, going into the abyss and sort of processing trauma. And I keep thinking about Alice in Wonderland too, going
Yeah.
into the other side. But I mean, for you, are they the same approach, or does it sort of depend on the poem that you're writing? And how do you know if it's a poem, like, and how do you know if it's just like therapy?
Right.
Maybe it's the same.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. I mean, they're not completely, I think everything is connected, which is an easy answer, but it's like also deeply true for me and important. But I think that scientific curiosity for me, wanting to better understand the known facts about something, always is also connecting me to the mysteries that we can't fully define in numbers and terminology. And the piece of the animal, like a lot of my work in my PhD program was trying to figure out how to connect the cerebral stuff that I was being asked and trained to do to what was really more interesting to me as a human, which had to do with imagination, curiosity, vulnerability, emotion, So for me, I spent a lot of time trying to connect like what I cared about as a scholar with what I cared about as a person, which I know those should not be different entities, but for a while I began to fear that I was being split into a brain and a body, which higher education can do to a lot of us. And my dissertation, I won't go way into it, but it looks at animal representation in post-Holocaust Jewish American poetry. So I found a way to connect it to the things I was already caring about as a poet. So the two things, like the Flesh Enough poems fed the research, which fed the poems, but they're different acts, they're different ways of asking questions. When I do it in poetry, I get to follow intuition more freely. In a dissertation chapter, I have to then find a critic to bring in to argue with, which I also got tired of. I'm like, I don't want to argue. I want to just build. Let's just build. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Kathy, you have any want to chime in?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I really appreciate the way that you move from the facts. I think that that's something that's it's hard sometimes. You get so wrapped up in the facts. You think you're writing a poem, but it's really not a poem yet. And making that leap into what's going to make it a poem, I think that's something that many of us struggle with. So I really appreciated that poem, as an example. But also, and this is a comment, not a question really, but you also do some amazing things with that idea of memory and sensory memory. And I've often felt that there's certain things that I even just things I love that I have to love because of my ancestors.
Yes.
And although my family's Greek, they were part of that craziness in Asia Minor, where the different cultures were thrown out to make the Turkish state. And so there's a similar feeling to that wandering of the Jews that you talked about, and the connections to different places in the world. And the things that were unique to those areas.
Yeah, I think that being curious about that it's like so life-giving. It's so enriching to think, you know, who else before me cared about this thing, and why and where and when, you know. It helps remind us that we're not alone in our lives in this very basic and deep way, you know.
And you sort of give me permission for saying that more freely aloud, whereas I often felt sort of apologetic saying it because maybe I'm just making this up and it's just my imagination. But to hear the strength of your commitment to it, it's really empowering.
Thank you. I mean, that phrase is so deep, just my imagination, as if it's like just it's just a speck of dust. It's just my imagination. And it's like, I think I became more convicted because I was in an intellectual space that treated the imagination similarly. There's the work, and then there's just the imagination. But the more we can be like, no, the imagination is the work. This is the life, you know. And what we dream of and what we remember that we can't fully understand, like that's the goods, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Darla, let me ask you, because tell me your title at the Writing Center.
I'm the assistant director. Yeah, so we're like this large academic center at Temple. We have a STEM tutoring program, academic coaching, writing, tutoring, language. So I oversee a 40-person writing tutoring staff.
Wow, 40 people?
Yeah, it's big. Yeah.
So I guess in terms of the guidance that the program would give, what kind of, because you've got your science, you've got your imagination, your curiosity. Is it kind of thematic guidance for some of your students or participants? And how do you encourage them to kind of, maybe get out of their own way?
Yeah. So luckily I get to also teach poetry workshops at Temple. So I get to be in a small room with a small number of students and more freely explore that landscape in the land of poetry writing. At the Writing Center, we do support writers of poetry, but it's also much more students in introductory composition classes, writing their first research papers, doing their major capstone papers. So we do have strategies that our tutors use to help writers get out of their own way. Like mind maps, where you help a writer sort of just name what are the key terms that keep flashing off in your brain that you want to join in some way, and how can they be joined by commonalities or questions. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, I know writing. Yeah, the writing is. Yeah, I mean, you read stuff. People going to college can't write or read. I mean, I don't know. I feel like no, I'm joking about it, but I think it's an important skill. Communication is so important, and whether it's by email, LinkedIn, poetry, face to face. So if that's part of the education, it's great. Oh, I think she just froze. Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, she froze. She froze. That's what happens when you're in Philly.
Oh no!
Philadelphia freeze.
Yes, you
Yeah,
are.
you're back. Yeah, you had this Philadelphia freeze thing. I mentioned
I just got so sweaty. I was like, oh no!
I mentioned writing as a skill, and all of a sudden you froze. Yeah, you froze. Yeah. Oh boy, I mean, challenge at work. Watch out.
Yeah, that's so funny.
No. So please share some more poems with us, because I feel like I don't know, Andrea and Kathy, maybe we should make this an 1.5-hour program so I can have a half hour of humor and chat, and then we can have an hour of poetry. So
yeah.
but please share some more poems with us.
Yeah, I'm gonna read, I think, maybe 3 poems from Cleve, which is my full-length book. Actually, the cover art of both of them, it's the same artist. Her name is Dawn Surratt. I love her work. So Cleve, I'm going to start with the poem that's actually in both books, which is kind of cheating, but it's connected to what we were just talking about. It's called In the Beginning. And I was in a class in my PhD where one of the professors said that the word origin is basically useless in academic writing because you can't pinpoint it. It doesn't have a common meaning. You can't say with absolute certainty what the origin is of something. And I just like very deeply rebelled against that idea that you have to be able to pin it down for it to be real. That the origin of things are always layered and going back as far as you can think. And I watched Andrea's most recent version of this, and you read a poem about like your legs being like your mother's, which are like her mother's, which this idea that like our bodies are also these archives. So this poem is called In the Beginning. The longer your beard, the softer I heard your father's voice as he finger brushed your hair, eyes closed, tickling your mother's belly, while you, tiny astronaut, slept amid her body's stars. I believe in the beginning, how it is always shuffling backward, how every brittle thing softens in reverse. This fig leaf, stiff as paper, once knew how to be small, potential, a speck of star. So I think that being curious about the origin of something doesn't have to be trying to pin down the verdict in a singular way. It can be a process of just reminding yourself how every single thing started as something else, which came from something else. Just letting yourself fall back in time in terms of your imagination.
Yeah, I love the astronaut word. Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, our grandson's going to turn 5, and just watching somebody grow, and this just to me is, I was working too hard when my kids were young, and now as a grandparent, I'm just like always amazed. I'm just amazed at what they do, how they do it, their language, their ability to negotiate stuff. Yeah.
I also I have a 5-year-old. He's turning 6 in August. But one of the things Cleve is about is my long journey with my wife to try to conceive a child. And we spent down all of our money with our first round of attempts. And then it took us a few years to be able to then start again. There's more than one way to conceive a child in a lesbian relationship, but we took a route that involved a sperm bank and a donor who wouldn't be active in our kid's life, which was a decision that, is complicated and not the right one for everybody. But some of these poems are about that journey and some of the longing and loss that came with a lot of attempts and a lot of dreaming and sort of wishing for this future kid. So when we first started, I was naive in some ways, and I subscribed to all of these magazines about pregnancy and newborns, just assuming that they would be relevant to my life very soon. And they became very quickly like a slap in the face and like a sort of a cruel gift to myself that they would keep coming. And I was like, still not yet pregnant. So I began to wonder about all these babies in these magazines and their families and where they came from. And I began to get curious about, what are the random factors that will come together to make my baby? And do they all come from this like place? I was asking sort of big spiritual questions. And that led me to this poem. It's called Pregnancy Magazine Babies. Have you seen Glossy Dears, my daughter? She was sitting in my lap just yesterday, a sand-filled balloon. I scratched her head with feathery fingers, traced her secret name before she evaporated into milky breath. Faces, chocolate, carnelian, ivory, olive, show me my son. who shook my wrist as a cat swats string in moonlight. I followed him with heavy eyes, hypnotized by the muscle of his crawling. I kissed his almost invisible cheek, but like hair in the pond, he vanished. Which of you is my child? You, sleeping in some other woman's sling, have never known my breast. You, pawing the mobile in the yellow nursery, were not my little sandbag, were not my little cat. I will do whatever you say if you give me my child. I will nurse, even if it hurts. I will stroller her around national parks. I will sing him love songs. I will carry a 7-inch knife. I will wear pink skirts, anything to bring her home, hear his laugh, feel her toes, let him break my heart.
Wow. Woo. Nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
Really.
So yeah, the curiosity that comes with longing for something over many, many years. It led to poems that were helpful for me to write, because it gave me like a shape for some of the things that I felt that were amorphous and just difficult and complex. So
And does the curiosity build for you over time? You know, if you're not at a point where you have some resolution, does it keep amplifying where all of a sudden it's going to burst out? I don't know. I just feel like this pregnancy baby, you know, was just like, you must have been pregnant and you were thinking about this, but then all of a sudden it just started to build.
yeah, I think that this poem captures some of that mounting pressure that I felt, but like so much of life, it had ebbs and flows, because you can't actually live like that on that high point of pressure, you know,
Yeah.
and still work a job and buy groceries and all the things you have to do.
Yeah.
So I think that like we have lots of different kinds of curiosity inside of us that we have to make room to awaken them in order to help us process life and think about the things that deserve our attention or that are demanding attention. But we also have to be able to put them away in order to function. Or put them aside, you know, not lock them up, but just put them aside for bits of time.
Yeah, that was an amazing poem. Really, thank you.
Thank you. I have one poem that comes out of trauma stuff, but I don't have to read it if you would rather I not. It does address sexual assault.
I'm okay.
Okay. I was talking about some of that trauma work that I had done and sort of learning to stay curious. And part of what PTSD does is it convinces your body that you're still in a place of trauma when you're not. Right. So like your chest might tighten or something else might happen in terms of the heat of your body or your muscles, even if you're currently safe. And after a few years of trauma therapy, I realized something that is stunning to not have consciously thought in over a decade, which is that when I was 14, my boyfriend raped me. And I had buried it very, very, very carefully. Suddenly, and I tucked it way, way, way away. And I think because I was doing this work and I felt safe, I was able to allow myself to see the truth and to kind of understand how it had shaped me as an adult. And because I could stay curious about it, I could imagine what that younger me, what I could give to her now that could help her. So I became over time brave enough to kind of go back imaginatively to this moment of breach. And this poem is called Breach, and it's about that. I'm going to show you it first. It has these little caesuras, these little spaces in the lines.
Yeah.
And the second page of it is the shape of a window.
Yeah.
So I was curious in the writing about letting light in and about space and about how that could manifest in the poem itself. So this is called Breach. Trust your stomach and thighs clenching. That dank room with its round bed and two small window births only dead end flashbacks. Self as teenage Olympia with choker and pinched nipples, a hollowed peach fuzz belly into which he pours molten wax, into which he pours and pours. Frosted window glass, the light murky and viscous, Billy Idol's white wedding floods the parentless air, body bent then like a 7. Maybe what happens next must, and so the breach will spasm for years, and so the mind will blank behind the dungeon door thrust shut. No lover will glance that tender skin without your legs and back jerking. You buck, cloven-hooved, then fawn, eyelashes slow through hyperventilation, face and feet numb. 14 years old, your puffed eyes trace stucco constellations. Child, you've done nothing wrong. Here, climb those dusty milk crates, slip this way, deep breath, beneath window glass. No ears can hear or eyes grip us. It's been 23 years. Wait till you see how our someday beloveds' slick hands knead cocoa butter into our cracked souls. How breezes blow, crisp, sweet, through our future rooms, vanilla, coffee, lavender. So, yeah, it was deeply healing. And that this is one of these poems which for me, like, I get really upset when people talk about how poetry should not be therapy. It's like, to me, poetry is a way of healing. That is one of its sacred jobs. And getting to write my way back and to, through this poem, offer some light and some air and some possibility to the younger part of me. It was like deeply like reconstituted a part of me in a way that was deeply healing. But I don't know that I could have done without the poem. The poem's how I could get there. So I took
take a breath.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm not choking because of that, but
So
I have a sore throat, so that's why I'm drinking lots of water.
good. Hydrate. It's super important.
Yeah, I gotta. If I don't hydrate, I get dizzy. So dizzy Gillespie. So that's a problem. Yeah.
Yes.
My family heritage.
There you go.
So let's. Yeah. No, it's not. It's a joke. I'm thinking I should have gone in. I went into comedy when I was a kid because, yeah. So I'm thinking of Andrea resurrecting my nascent career, and yeah. So let's take another break and have Andrea and Kathy, chime in or comment or question.
I'll go first. Darla, thanks for sharing that. That's really vulnerable and powerful. And I want to just like cuddle the 14-year-old you. And I feel like you, I think your poem did that though, and I think what I noticed about it is that you did it through using the senses, and how using the senses in a poem can be so powerful to evoke not only a feeling, but like a transformation, but what I wanted to touch on was kind of about like, gosh, I just wish we had like 2 hours. I'm just thinking about so many things. The idea of how trauma can live in your body, right? And the idea of how, like you were talking about before, how we are genetically linked to our ancestors, right? And how we can hold trauma our ancestors experienced in our bodies, and we feel that in our nervous systems. But then also as a queer person, like the idea of imagination and the idea of like what things we are handed, what things we are given in our ancestral line, but then using imagination with no map, we have to create a new reality. And I was thinking about that idea when you were trying to get pregnant and thinking about you reading these magazines. I'm assuming it's all straight people in the magazines.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know what my question is, but I'm just noticing all these threads, and I just wonder like how imagination, curiosity, presence can. Do I have a question? I don't know. I'm just thinking about things.
No, I love what you're saying. And I think that because imagination, poetry, curiosity, they're all tied to survival, and I think that as queer people, survival is also tied to being able to stay curious and to believe in hope that there is a way to make your life work, even if you haven't seen it quite reflected, that it's possible, to find love, to find, if you want, long-term partnership, to find it, to be able to build a family, be able to live in a land where your marriage is not questioned, right? Your parentage is not questioned, all of those things. So I don't know if I'm not answering a question you didn't ask really, but just kind of like saying yes. I think that it's all tied together, and for me, I think writing poetry is also tied to that, like honoring all of ourselves are complex. We all are multiple things at once. And for me, those things include being Jewish and being gay. And more recently, I'm still figuring out my language, but my pronouns are they and she. And I know there's a non-binary part of who I am, as well as a woman part of who I am. And having the language not quite hold it quite right, I could think of as being, oppressive, but instead I think about it as being, full of possibility. So how else can I name or express the person I am, which I think is part of the work of poetry too.
And Andrea, just one comment. I loved you would translate it differently. Living without a map. You talked about not having a map, and where you live, I was thinking of the Lewis and Clark expedition. I don't know when that was, 1802 or 1803. And, the western part of the United States, man, that was, country that hadn't been tread by anyone or any white person. And,
Right person.
how they had to basically live life without a map. I mean, I just think it's just, you want to go back to courage. It's living life without a map.
I'll just add a comment about your statement about trauma and writing through trauma, and actually I don't know what you said exactly, but just that idea I think is sometimes criticized, and I think maybe it's because people are looking at just that sort of free writing, journal entry kind of writing, and then calling it poetry or making a poem out of it without any craft or something like that. But I'm with you. I mean, some of the best poetry is what comes out of traumatic experiences, and it's so that the trauma helps you to write the poem, but the poem helps you through the trauma even more. I mean, I think and it can be different kinds of trauma. For me, it was losing a daughter at a young age, and poetry has helped me to survive.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's been key to my survival too. I think that part of what I came to have anger about was the fact that being in touch with your feelings is inherently looked down upon. I began to think about that as gendered in academic and art spaces, as if like earnest feeling should be embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of that. It's not that I like humor, I like irony, I like all of it, but like we don't have to totally close off the part of ourselves that have deep feeling, and we shouldn't actually, right? Like that's part of survival, is letting yourself be there and make from it.
I was just telling somebody today in a conversation about an experience with someone making me feel less than because my poem was a nature poem. It was also a survival poem, through trauma, but and that was clear in the poem. It wasn't a hidden aspect of it, but just like this, I mean, it feels similar, even though I'm talking about a nature poem, but it's that idea that if it's not an aggressive poem that's going to try to combat some kind of social injustice, that it's just too personal and it doesn't have any importance to anybody else.
How intense is it that a person's personal experience would not be thought of as being connected to social justice?
Yeah.
Like going back to like second wave feminism, right? Like the personal is political. The personal is part of social. Social is made of people, right? People in touch with who they really are and their histories and their actual desires and feelings. That is crucial to social change. How quick people can be to separate that out and to make fun of it. And it's like, that's how change happens, is that we're honest.
And then you think about like which voices have been historically talked over, like whose voices are considered, more proper, or the whole idea of like aggressive. I mean, think about it. Whose voices are anyway. Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
So Darla, we've got 10 minutes. So why don't you close us out with a few more poems? It's been a very intriguing. It has not been cerebral. So I just want to basically, we're going to check that box that you passed the tests. Andrea will grade her back up to a 5-star from a 4-star. So no, it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you.
But please, really.
Yeah, I'm going to read you a couple of poems from this new chapbook that I've started sending out places. It's currently called The Palace of My Gender, which is the name of one of the poems. I might change the name of the chapbook. I'm playing with that possibility. But among other things, it's an exploration of gender in my life and more broadly. So I'm going to read 2 poems. One of them, my son, when he first learned the word pronoun, he kept pronouncing it poor noun. And
it is it's a poor person's noun. The noun doesn't have any money, so it has to run away to poor noun. I love it.
Yeah, so I began to wonder, like, how would I spell this, like if I want to document it, because it's cute, and one documents the things their kids might do that are funny or cute. And I was like, is it poor, like P-O-O-R, like, oh, poor noun, only 2 or 3 letters, you poor thing. Or pour, like pouring water, like into a container, or pour as in porous. And I decided to write, it's a very short poem. It's called Poor Nouns, P-O-R-E, nouns. Unblunt birthed boundaries into poured sheen. Her, they, them, she, breathing robes to adorn embodied me. Just thinking about how pronouns can be porous. That's one of the gifts maybe of our time in terms of what queer and trans people are bringing to our language, the sense of how you can layer them on like robes, how they're just part of how we present to the world and how we communicate about ourselves.
Yeah. Nice.
So so I'm going to read you, I think, one more. If we have time, I could do one more after it. We'll see. But this is a poem that I've been working on for years, and it keeps changing what it's about. So I sort of don't trust it to be done, but it's in this manuscript and we're just going to go with it for now,
Version 16.
Version 16. It's a poem in 3 parts, and it started off one part, and then it, I say, the revision process can just be maddening sometimes. Exciting, joyful, crazy making, all of it. This poem is called On Being Given Glasses. And it came out of sort of this, I think, this sort of curiosity I had. My whole life since I was in 6th grade, I think back to the moment when I first got glasses with such tenderness and such like wonder and almost overwhelm that had to do with the fact of like finally looking up and seeing leaves, as like individual shapes on trees. And I began to think about like the various ways we put on glasses to see better in our lives. So I began thinking about that metaphorically. And that wondering led to this poem. So have a sip of water. On Being Given Glasses. 1. To think that during my youth's blur, Leaves overhead were actually outlined, individual, crisp, even when our faces baked outside West Side Pavilion, craning at eucalyptus. Green, silver, blues shivered in Santa Ana winds. Before glasses, palm husks sneered, and palm leaves aloft shook waxy hair, and I assumed myself invisible beyond the body's immediate sphere. Cross-legged in grass, I could braid clover, could mumble Ordinary World by Duran Duran. Putting on my first glasses, I wept truly for beauty. The trees, everywhere the trees crowned with sharp, distinct leaves. Next, I devised new ways to hide, since the sphere of me-sized daylight no longer could blur me outside. When did you learn to read the treetop leaves, to form the phonemes of overstory between tongue, palate, and teeth? 2. To be seen on one's own terms, to close one's eyes and disappear, to throw glasses into sea, to make of one's meds confetti, nortriptyline, buspirone, zolmitriptan, compazine, to sob into t-shirts, to crawl from couch to bed, to tremble the length of my flesh, all forest, no trees. It's not romantic as it seems, to crumple under, to fold in. 3. The I am is the centered I, the they I, who sometimes is still the she I, the I hungry to hook sibilance beyond surf or snarl. Spot the plum to pluck the I am and break its blush over teeth, folded flesh, purpling juice down chin, downwind on a Friday. The I am visions through glass, de-anxietyified, de-aurified, de-migraine gripped. To leaf, to leave, to sea swell, to plumb, the I am drowns or bolts inside if I must return to when all was blurred color. Then I remember the I am is blurred orange, blues, yellows, greens, every bit as brilliant as she, they, I seem. That's a weird poem. And I don't, like every time thank you, every time I read it, every time I've worked on it more, I still am curious about all of its layers. I'm still curious about what it's teaching me. I still think there are parts that I need to deepen, and maybe that happens in my own head, or maybe it happens in the poem itself. But thinking about the ways that seeing is a choice, and the more you know, you can't unknow all the things you know. I think that I can't explain the poem very articulately because it still has me in the state of kind of sort of like an unfinished wonder about it. But
who
yeah.
who figured out finally that you really couldn't see the right way?
It was in science class in 6th grade. I had a teacher who noticed that I was squinting really hard at the chalkboard. And thank goodness she sent me to the nurse's office and said I should get a vision test. I don't know how no one else in my life had noticed it. I certainly hadn't noticed that I was the only one squinting to see.
But I think it's amazing to notice. I think I've paid more attention that one intersection of someone else's life and your life that changes your life forever.
Yeah.
That to me is beyond amazing.
It is amazing. And I think one of the places I went with this was I've heard about people, my dad has hearing aids, and I've heard of other people with hearing aids taking them off sometimes to just have it be quieter. Right. And thinking about taking off glasses to just let the world be blurry for a little while. Just let it be softer. Like let yourself go a little bit. So I find that really interesting. I think is where I'll leave it. I'm still wondering about it and thinking about it. The choice for clarity,
Well, we're at the end of our hour, and I feel like had such a window into your life. I feel like, obviously I'm going to have to come down for a cheesesteak or something
Yes.
just to complete the experience. But no, it's personal, but it's prophetic. I don't know. There's like this kind of ping pong thing going on that I don't know. I don't know. Andrea, Kathy, any final comments?
I
All
just have
wonderful.
enjoyed this hour so much.
Me
Such a
too.
gift, Darla. I love your work. I love this conversation.
I love
It's
this
great to see you
conversation
again, Kathy,
too.
too.
I've really enjoyed it too. This has been wonderful.
Thank you both, and thank you, John and Rachel in the background in the little black boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been so grateful for this space and time. It's been wonderful to share.
Oh no, it's been fantastic. You kidding? This is the amazing part of my life. Yeah. The rest of it is just about breathing or something. I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
Just
There's a poem.
breathing.
I'm gonna find that.
Just breathing.
I'm gonna find my latest poem and send it to all of you so you can see it. Yeah, I
Please.
get into these moods where just jump off a cliff and write it on the way down. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You don't have to jump off the cliff. You could just walk to the cliff and then write.
Yeah, you can walk to the
back
cliff.
again.
There we go.
Yeah.
There you go. Interrupting my creative process. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Hey, Rachel, we should stop the recording.